Also, neutrality is a point that very repeatedly comes up. In fact, Ukraine was a neutral state when the Russian aggression started in 2014. Ukraine had neutrality officially declared by the Verkhovna Rada under the Yanukovych government, and this was valid under the end of 2014. So neutrality obviously did not save Ukraine from Russian.
Can you be brief?
Yes, this is no question. This is a statement, and since it was. It's a statement, and this is as it was introduced. This is a possibility for open discussion, and I think that it's necessary to rectify some things that are wrong. That I know it, and I can send you the information. Yes,
please
very good. Okay, last point. No diplomacy. As you certainly remember, as do most people here, there was even a U.S. summit, a U.S.-Russian summit in May 2021 in order to prevent this war from happening. So there was diplomacy happening, and until the very last week before the war, many leaders of NATO countries went away to Moscow to even assure in front of running TV cameras the Russian leader that no Ukrainian accession into NATO was imminent. So I needed to say these things, including, of course, French President Macron and German Chancellor Scholz. So these were the main points I wanted to make. Thank you.
All right. So I take one more. Mr. Bayard, have you been?
A very short question. Okay. So, thank you, Professor Sachs, for your excellent presentation. My question goes back to the root cause of all this disastrous conflict. Why Russia, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, was not accepted by Europeans, by the West generally? For example, for a clearer, closer economic cooperation and things like that. Thank you.
All right. So we have Biden, the European Commission. We have the master plan here, the global master plan. Then we have more or less, Wolfgang Müller said a lot, but Maidan was the main argument. And yeah, I forgot now what you said.
Yeah. Biden could choose a different course. He has been, however, on the path of NATO expansion for at least a quarter century. So this is not something new. This has been his campaign too. From the 1990s, he was one of the most gung-ho supporters of the military-industrial complex and of NATO enlargement as a senator. And in 2014, he played a personal role in the Maidan events. I think it's, so of course he should choose a different path. I was, by the way, an advisor to Mr. Borrell for a short time, an unpaid but official advisor. And then I said one day that I thought that the United States had destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline, and he fired me that day. So that is how my career as advisor to the European Union ended, by my statement, which I still stand by, that the United States most likely destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline. The only competing theory now, by the way, is the one put forward by the United States, which is that Ukraine did it. So take your choice. But I think the United States probably did it, and it's probably not fair to blame Ukraine for this, but it's one or the other. It wasn't Russia. Everybody agrees that it wasn't Russia. In the U.S. intelligence community, their theory is it was Ukraine. That was in the New York Times a few days ago. My theory is Seymour Hersh account that the United States did this. In any event, that brought an end to my illustrious advising the European Commission on foreign policy. Very abruptly, by the way. It took less than a day to end my career in that capacity. So I think the Professor
Müller?
Miller, yes.
But that was the master plan
Yeah,
before. as well.
I will also say just a word. I think many of our differences are about the Euromaidan. I don't think it's incidental that Victoria Nuland was on tape 3 weeks before the violent overthrow of the government, because it ended with a shooting from the Maidan-controlled buildings and a storming of the government buildings. It was a violent overthrow. And she was on tape describing exactly what the next government would be. So she was planning this change. And I happen to have some direct, odd experience with this. I know that significant U.S. money flowed into the Maidan in ways that are really wrong, seriously wrong. And the United States played a significant role in this. So I don't dispute, of course, that neutrality was not the issue at that point, except for the U.S., which opposed Yanukovych. Yanukovych wanted neutrality, but the U.S. wanted a government that supported NATO enlargement, and it got it in the end, because by the end of 2014, the government was now calling for joining NATO. Of course, you know very, very well as an expert in this that the first act of the parliament, though not implemented, was to ban the Russian language. This brought into... no, is that...
Never a ban of Russian language. It was a change of the language law for regional minority languages being officially accepted.
That's correct. We agree. Okay, we agree. Thank you for the clarification. On the U.S. and Europe, I admit my imagination is often not good enough to know what they really have in mind. I don't think this is an anti-Europe venture of the United States, but it is a hegemonic venture, clearly, because that's not even subtle. The idea of the United States is the United States should have full spectrum dominance in all regions of the world. That's the idea. And of course, the two threats to that perceived by the United States are Russia and China. And so the U.S. foreign policy and strategic policy and defense policy are absolutely clear on these points. And I think that the basic idea is the U.S. likes Europe well enough, but it absolutely wants full dominance over Eurasia. And that's what Zbig was talking about in the global chessboard, how to get full dominance over Eurasia. And he pointed out that control of Ukraine, he called it the geographic pivot of Eurasia. And that was the theory, and he spelled it out in detail, and I think it is the neoconservative vision that has been played out now for 30 years. So I don't think it's per se anti-European. It's not pro-European, it's pro-American. And it is, to my mind, extremely wrong-headed to think when you are 4.1% of the world population that you should run the world or aim to be the unrivaled power of the world, aim to have primacy everywhere. And there's so many vivid examples of how this thinking works. I'll give you one more that is interesting. A former colleague of mine, and then he became a very esteemed ambassador, Robert Blackwell, wrote in 2015 how the United States needed to confront China because China's rise was no longer in America's interest. And he spelled out all the measures that the United States should take to limit China's rise. And they're being followed one by one by one. For example,